Whisky is a distilled spirit made from fermented grain mass of barley, corn, rye, and wheat. We can make whisky from single variety of grains or by mix of these grains. Now, which type of grain and in how much proportion to be used is called mash bill. Mash bill is a kind of recipe of mash according to the type of whisky you are producing. For more detail on how to make whisky and its process, watch my previous video. In this video, I'll cover the types of whisky. Firstly, let's talk about some famous American whisky. Now for making whisky, if we use at least 51% corn in mash bill along with other grains, then this whisky would be called Bourbon whisky. Kentucky is famous for producing bourbon whisky. Now there is one more whisky similar to bourbon whisky, that is Tennessee whiskey. It is also produced from a grain mixture that include at least 51% corn. Then how it is different from bourbon? One is its geographical designation. Tennessee whiskey can only be produced in Tennessee as per United States, but bourbon can be produced anywhere in United States. Second is filtration process. Before aging, Tennessee whiskey is filtered through sugar maple charcoal, which imparts a smoother and slightly sweeter character to the spirit. This process is called Lincoln County process. This step is not required for bourbon whisky. Now at some American whisky, you will also find written sour mash. It is a process in the distilling industry that uses material from an older batch of mash to start the fermentation of a new batch. Now, what if we use 100% corn for making whisky? Then we call it corn whisky. Normally, some places it has to be at least 80% corn, then also it's called corn whisky. And it does not require aging. Can be bottled directly after distillation. These types of whiskies which does not require aging are called unaged whiskies. For unaged whiskey, I remember one more term, white whiskey. Normally, a whiskey is a clear spirit before going into barrel for aging, and any whiskey which is not aged and directly bottled is called white whiskey. Related to white whiskey, there is one more term, Moonshine whiskey. It is also associated with American history. In late 18th century, federal government enacted a tax on distilled spirits. So to avoid these taxes, small producers started making whiskey illegally at night, hence the name Moonshine. And also they were not able to store or age it, hence was sold directly without aging. Traditionally, white whiskey or Moonshine whiskey was made with corn, but later other grains were also used as per the region and availability. Today there are lots of products sold that call themselves Moonshine for the sake of nostalgia, tradition and mystique. But the same product is just a white whiskey. There is one more term you can notice on this bottle, single cask. Single cask whiskey, also known as single barrel whiskey, is a type of whiskey that is bottled from a single cask or barrel, rather than being blended with whiskey from multiple casks. Comes exclusively from one particular cask, offering a unique and unblended expression of the distiller's product. Similarly, we also have American rye whiskey. If we use minimum 51% rye grain in mash bills, these American whiskies are aged in newly charred oak barrels. Then we have Canadian whiskey. The whiskey which are produced and aged in Canada are called Canadian whiskey. It typically contains a blend of grains such as corn, rye, barley, wheat. While rye is the commonly used and dominant grain in Canadian whiskey, so some people also refer Canadian whiskey as rye whiskey. Then we have Japanese whiskey, again which is produced in Japan and governed by Japanese regulations. Whiskies are produced in various countries worldwide, often influenced by local ingredients and traditions. These includes Indian whiskey, Welsh whiskey from United Kingdom, Australian whiskey, and more. Now at many bottles packing, you must have seen written malt whiskey. As you can see on this Japanese whiskey, simply if we use malted grains while making whiskey, then it would be called malt whiskey. For malted grains, simply the grains you are using are firstly moistened and allowed to partially sprout these kind of shoots and rootlets called germination. Then this germination process is stopped by slow heating and these grains are dried. Now these dried grains are called malted grains. Now if we use these malted grains for whiskey making, then it would be called malt whiskey. Now there is one more term, single malt whiskey. As the name single means 100% only one type of grain is used and the entire whiskey making process happened at a single distillery, then it would be called single malt whiskey. Distilleries are the places or factories where these distilled beverages such as whiskey, rum, gin, vodka, etc. are produced. Also we have blended malt whiskies. When we blend or mix single malt whiskies from different distilleries. In general and traditionally also, malt whiskies are made from malted barley only, and still the whiskey like Scotch whiskey and Irish malt whiskies are known for using malted barley. Now, any whiskey that is made in Scotland as per their laws and regulations is called Scotch. Irish whiskey are the whiskies distilled in Ireland and mainly barley, wheat and corn grains are used. Also as per laws, both Scotch and Irish whiskey must be aged minimum of 3 years. Then we have craft or artisanal whiskey, also known as small batch whiskey production, refer to whiskey that is produced by small independent distilleries with an emphasis on traditional methods, quality and unique expressions. These distilleries often produce whiskey in smaller quantities compared to larger, more established distilleries. Now you have basic understanding of all type of whiskies and what's the meaning of different terms written on its label. For any other type of whiskey that you know, you can comment down below. Thank you for watching and stay tuned.